My little buddy got who wanted to say hi, but then he got a little bit tired of waiting for me to get my act together on this video for this week. So he's behind me snoring right now.
Hi everyone, and happy Wednesday. This week's video, let me just say, the creation of this week's video has been a journey. Yep, it's been a journey. The actual first painting I created, the first 6 clips I filmed were totally blurry and absolutely unusable. I finished the process anyway, but I feel like there's just too much missing in that process for me to actually post what I filmed. So I decided to start over, and after starting this process, it was going relatively well. I really got the painting to a point where if my garbage can had a voice, it would have been talking to me and telling me to throw out that painting. Oh my goodness. But I managed to save it. And I managed to save it with an ingredient, or a supply, I should say, that I really love, that has saved the day for me many, many times. And I think it's one that is important for me anyway to have in my studio. And maybe after watching this, you'll feel compelled to have it in your studio too, because it's not all that expensive and it really can make such a huge difference. So yeah, it's been a journey, but I got this painting from the brink of being at the point of no return to turning into a painting that I really, really love, and that I think is fitting for the fact that it's spring. So I'll cut the suspense and just get the process going. Please bear with me, because there will be points in this painting process where I'm sure you'll be like, where the heck is she going with this? Because I was feeling like that for sure. But yeah, you'll see. It's gonna turn out. I think it's gonna turn out. Anyway, you be the judge. So let's get going with the video.
When I first set out with the idea for this painting, I wanted to make use of some paint that I bought what seems like eons ago that I actually never really used that much. I think the colors in the palette are quite beautiful, but I'm not really much of a pastel person. I think I just never feel really drawn to using them. So I wanted to step out of the box and push myself to use some colors that I don't typically paint with and see what I could do. So I'm starting with this little color palette. I don't really have a set plan. What I do know is I want to create a background, and then I want to go over that background with mark making using my watercolors and using a variety of different brushes to make different marks so that I can learn more about my brushes and also learn about the different types of colors that I like together. Because these colors are pastels, they have a bit of a milky look to them. They seem not opaque. I guess opaque is not really the right word to use, but they are definitely um, more chalky, maybe. And they are different than the types of paints I'm used to painting with, because I generally love to paint with very bright colors. So these colors are more muted. They're beautiful. They're really beautiful. But I don't quite feel all that comfortable with them. So the only way for me to actually ever get comfortable with them is to actually put them to use. Okay, so remember I said journey. This process was a journey. Ah, forgot to turn my camera on when I started filming this portion. I mean, what can you do? You just kind of have to keep going, right? Because that's what it is, and I was not going to start this a third time. Oh man. Anywho, hopefully you can see pretty clearly what I've done. I'm just playing with this flat brush and I'm adding this color and that's pretty much all I've done in this section of the video. So I had to let the painting go for a little bit because I think I I got myself to a point of frustration and I don't know about you, but when I'm frustrated, things don't generally go extremely well when I'm painting. So I let it go for a few days and I came back to it. And now I'm feeling ready to tackle some new challenges and see what I can do to turn this painting into something I like. So I'm continuing to explore this little palette of colors. It's, again, a palette that I'm not very used to working with. The colors are pretty, but they're not colors I typically tend to turn towards. So I'm trying to push myself out of my comfort zone, and I think it's good for us to do that because we can discover some things along the way that will either help us continue to grow in our skill development, and also, more importantly, it helps us to figure out our own artistic style. I have a very strong preference for working with brighter colors. And so pastels have just not really been my thing. But what I do see is that even though they may not be the thing I want to turn to all the time, they could have a place in some of my backgrounds, or they could play a more secondary role in some of my paintings, maybe. So having a chance to explore this little palette is going to help me figure these things out, and I hope you can give yourself permission to do these types of explorations as well, because they can be very helpful. So I'm continuing to work with this little palette, and I'm really pushing myself to use colors that I typically would not want to use. And this somewhat baby pink, bubblegum pink looking color, the color name is on the palette, but can't really see what it is, and I'll have it in my video description. Anyway, this is definitely not a color I generally would like, but it kind of looks pretty in my palette, and I thought, might as well give it a try. But the more and more I'm adding elements to this painting, I'm really feeling drawn to going a little bit more dramatic, and I'm feeling drawn to going more dramatic with my color choices and adding some more dark value contrast, because these colors are definitely all in the same type of value, and I'm not really digging that so much. But that's okay. This is an experimentation process, and every little thing I add to the painting will somehow contribute to it, no matter what. So when intuition sets in and it starts talking to me really loud, for me, it's important that I listen. And I was feeling called to add some more vibrant color to the painting and to start working on my value contrast. And so that's why I set the other little palette aside and I'm starting to add some of my favorite colors to the painting. And already, for me, as I'm doing this, I'm starting to feel like there's something more interesting happening with the painting, probably because I'm adding color that I really enjoy and I feel like it's brightening up that very muted background. So it's important to listen when your intuition is talking to you. That's your internal creative voice, your own specific likes and dislikes. your own creative style that's actually talking to you. And so for me, when that happens, I follow the call, and usually it does not steer me wrong. So I'm using this color that I really love, and I'm exploring my mark making with my brush. I'm in the process of really just playing, and it's kind of like a creative self-discovery process. So I'm being careful to repeat the different marks in different areas of the background or the painting, but I'm trying not to be too precious. I guess in some ways I am somewhat precious. I don't want it to be a complete mess, but it'll get there. Oh man. Anywho, I'm sorry. I it was really fun, but it was honestly also a very frustrating process because, I'm playing, and the playful part of it, when I'm not in my mind critiquing the painting, that's fun. But my inner critic often will step in and start, offering me advice that I don't really want or need. um, because this is not a dangerous practice. My life is not at risk here. Okay, so my inner critic is being more judgy than helpful right now, but that's okay. So I flipped the painting around because I think it's important to do that. If you're always looking at a painting, especially an abstract, from the same perspective, it starts to get hard to see where else you could go. So I flipped things around, and I'm starting to work with another color that I really like. And I want to see if I can add some more elements, and especially some more color that will start to make this painting become more lively. As I'm going along, I'm not only working on changing the colors and adding more color to my painting, but I'm also working on changing the brush strokes, and I'm also working with different brushes because I want to practice creating different marks. I want to also see all the different ways I can move my brush to create marks on my painting. And so I'm giving myself the space to explore that. This is definitely a lot more busy than I normally would want my paintings to be, and I that's pure judgment on my part, and I'm doing my best not to let myself go down that road of judging and being critical of what I'm doing, because the whole point is to play, to explore mark making, to explore color combinations. And yes, it's busy. But that's sometimes what play is. It's busy, and you're, kind of not really thinking through the whole process. So I'm using my brush in different ways. I'm adding more color. This color here, because it's a bit darker, is also adding some nice value contrast, which I like and I think was in really dire need in this painting. So I'm just continuing to explore. And I'm actually really loving exploring in this way with my different brushes because I'm discovering things about them as I go along. And it's kind of helping me see how maybe I could use some of those little brush strokes that I'm making in another type of painting. I think I started to get there a little while ago, but it's really getting closer and closer to that point I was telling you about. That point where I was on the brink of the point of no return. Oh, it's like I'm not super happy, I guess, with the colors in the background, so I'm trying to find ways to maybe add some more vibrant color to sort of save the day. And in some ways, it's helping. I really do like this orange. I feel like it's playing well against the turquoise, but those mm, like more pastel colors in the background. Maybe the purple looks okay against that orange. Um, but I don't know, it just still feels like there's something missing. And really, it's so busy. How could there be anything missing, you say? I feel the same way. I don't know, but I just kept going and going and going to the point where I was like literally kind of speechless looking at this painting. But it's okay. It's okay. It's all about, pushing the envelope and seeing how far you can take things so that you can actually teach yourself that you have the ability to bring it back somehow. And I will, but I'm not there yet. I still have a little bit more to do to quote unquote ruin this painting. So at this point, I thought, you know what? I looked at my palette and I thought, red. I need some red. Red's really gonna change change things around. Yeah. But actually, I finally got to my tipping point. I got to the point where I'm like, oh goodness, you're gonna have a hard time doing something with this. Ah, so, I had to add some more red to see if somehow it would fix it, and it didn't. So I guess I really needed to get myself to this point here where I was adding things, adding color in particular, and adding elements that had me scratching my head, wondering what I was thinking, and really, oh, getting it to a point that I really don't like. This is in my mind, again, being totally judgy. This is not what I consider pretty, but I needed to get here in order to sort of push myself against the creative wall and figure out what I was going to do next because I really did not want to have to start a third painting process. I did not. So I'm at the point now where I'm about to switch things up and save the painting. Because this painting is so busy, the only way I can think of to really save it is to work on calming things down by creating some negative space. So I'm first of all using a dark color to create some little images that I like, very simple foliage. And after I'm done adding these little elements, which right now, again, only seem to be adding to the busyness of the painting, I'm going to use my magic supply, Gesso, to work on creating my negative space, and that's going to calm everything down. And what I love about using gesso in this way is that with watercolors, it has some really, really cool effects. Oh my goodness, I forgot to turn my camera on again. It is just one of those days. Anywho, I have started adding gesso around the outside, like of the shapes that I drew, the foliage shapes that I drew. And what I love about using gesso with watercolor is that watercolor is movable even after it's dry. So because I'm coming in with a little bit of gesso and some water over top of the watercolor, it is mixing into my gesso a little bit, and it's sort of toning down everything that's happening in the background while also keeping the colors that are in my foliage. So I really, really love this effect. And I think honestly, it's the only way that I could think of to save this painting because it was really heading down busy street and it was not a good street to be on. So yeah, this gesso is working really well to do what I want it to do. Now, I have to be careful as I'm doing this to not overbrush the areas because of course the watercolor is lifting, and if I overbrush and all of these colors, and there's a lot of different colors on that painting background, they could start mixing together and create sort of a like a muddy color with my gesso, and I wouldn't really like that either. So I'm trying to be careful to not overdo it, but at the same time I want to pick up some of that watercolor and mix it with my gesso. Once the gesso and the watercolor mix together and have dried a little bit more, I can come back in with a little bit more gesso and water and paint another very light coat of gesso on top. I'll still be able to see the colors underneath, but they'll be a little bit more muted and blended. And because the gesso, that first layer of gesso and watercolor has dried a little bit, there's less of a risk of everything sort of over blending and creating that muddy color I was telling you about. So when it first dawned on me to use gesso to work with negative space, and the first thing that came to mind was for me to add some foliage using one darker value, I really just focused on keeping the shapes as simple as possible because I didn't want my color blocking to be too complicated or too hard to do around the shapes. So now I'm coming back in with that same color and I'm painting over these areas, and I kind of feel like it's spring, and soon we'll be able to see flowers, and I'm really super excited about that and looking forward to it. So I kind of feel like I need to add something that looks a little floral to my leaves, and so I've added a couple of stems. And I don't, this is more like an abstract kind of painting. I mean, you can hopefully tell that that's leaves, that those are leaves on my on my painting. But I'm not trying to paint any particular flower. It's not really kind of my jam. I I do love flowers. I garden. You would think I would be painting flowers all the time. But when I'm painting, I like to keep things a little bit more abstract. So I've decided to just keep the shape of my flowers very, very simple. I don't know that they're going to be one type of flower in particular. Maybe they look a little bit like hyacinths, or not even, because I know the foliage on hyacinths doesn't look like that, but again, not real flowers, so I'm just not gonna overanalyze it. I'm just going with it. So I'm just drawing these little circles just to give the semblance of flowers on these stems. And once I've done that, I think I might add a little bit of color to those simile flowers, and then I think I'll be ready to call the painting done. I had thought of maybe making my simile flowers gold. I don't know, probably because I love gold, but it didn't really seem to fit, and I didn't know where else I would add gold to the rest of the painting without having it be unbalanced. So I decided to go with a color that was already in the background of my painting, and I added a little bit more red. It's probably more of a typical color that we would find on flowers. So even though my flowers are not typical, I guess the color hopefully translates the idea that these are supposed to be flowers. I think removing the tape from my paper is really going to give an even better perspective on the final look of this painting. And once I'm done doing that, I will move in closer so you can see the interesting details. Gesso saved the day. I really love how this very busy start to the painting ended up becoming something much more laid back and calm, and I love how it turned out. It's not the first time, like I said, that I've used gesso in this way, but when I first started painting, I thought gesso was just something you use to get your canvas ready for painting. I never realized just exactly how versatile gesso can be. Is gesso a part of your creative kit? If you had the fortitude to make it all the way to the end of this video with me, I want to say a huge thank you because it's been a journey and I know it, so I appreciate you being here. I hope this video was a chance for you to learn a thing or two about the creative process. I wish you all a wonderful week and most importantly, happy creating!